How NVIDIA became a giant.
Shares up 5%. NVIDIA's pitch was simple. From NVIDIA really drive.
In 1993, three engineers rented a booth at a trade show showing off a graphics chip nobody asked for. Today, that company is worth more than the entire GDP of France. This is a story of NVIDIA and how a chip designed for video games became the backbone of artificial intelligence and the most valuable tech race in human history. It's 1993. Jensen Huang is 30 years old. He's an engineer at LSI Logic. His two co-founders, Chris Malchowski and Curtis Prem, are from Sun Microsystems. They meet at Denny's in San Jose, which Jensen Huang has described as one of NVIDIA's first offices. They believe that 3D graphics will move far beyond niche applications and become essential to gaming, simulations, design, and countless everyday experiences. The challenge was that traditional CPUs weren't built for that future. So they set out to build a dedicated graphics processor, a chip that renders images but extraordinarily fast. Their first chip, the MV1, launched in 1995. The performance was middling and it didn't support the graphics standard the market was converging on. NVIDIA nearly went bankrupt. They burned through most of their funding quick. Jensen had to lay off staff and pivot. So let's go now to 1997. The PC gaming market is exploding. Quake, Tomb Raider, Age of Empires. Gamers are hungry for better graphics and a new standard is taking over. DirectX from Microsoft. NVIDIA scraped their old architecture and built the Riva 128 from scratch in just 4 months. That's insane by cheap design standards. And it worked. However, the moment that changed everything came in 1999. NVIDIA released the GeForce 256. They called it the world's first GPU, Graphics Processing Unit. The GeForce 256 could handle geometric calculations directly on the chip, freeing the CPU from that work. Gamers loved it, gamer developers loved it, and NVIDIA had a brand new category all to themselves. Everything was smooth until the early 2000s. NVIDIA fought a brutal war with ATI, later acquired by AMD, for dominance in the GPU market. It was a leapfrog battle. One company would release a faster card, the other would respond 6 months later, back and forth year after year. NVIDIA won more often than not because they moved fast. Jensen Huang noticed that the architecture of a GPU was perfect for a problem that had absolutely nothing to do with rendering pixels. In 2006, NVIDIA launched CUDA, Compute Unified Device Architecture. It was a programming platform that let developers use NVIDIA GPUs not just for graphics, but for general computation. Scientists, engineers, researchers, anyone who needed to crunch massive amounts of data in parallel could now use a gaming chip to do it. The reception was lukewarm at first. The scientific community didn't really use gaming hardware. And Jensen, he didn't care. He poured resources into CUDA anyway. He built libraries, developer tools, support teams. This decision will take 15 years to fully pay off. He was playing a game nobody else was playing. Let's go now to 2012. A team at the University of Toronto, led by Geoffrey Hinton, enters an AI image recognition competition called ImageNet. Their model, AlexNet, destroys the competition. They train it on 2 NVIDIA GTX 580 GPUs. The AI research world took notice. Suddenly, deep learning, a technique that had been around for decades but was always too slow to train at scale, became practical. And NVIDIA's GPUs were the engine. Labs started buying them, then cloud companies, then everyone. Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, they all needed GPUs, thousands of them, stacked in warehouses, running 24/7. And NVIDIA, thanks to 15 years of CUDA development, had an almost insurmountable lead, not just in hardware, but in software. Switching away from NVIDIA's ecosystem meant rewriting years of code. Nobody wanted to do that. CUDA became NVIDIA's true moat. Finally, in 2022, ChatGPT launches. The world loses its mind over AI, and every tech company on Earth realizes they need more compute to train and run AI models. The chip at the center of it all, NVIDIA's H100. A single chip costs around $30,000. Demand so vastly outstripped supply that companies were publicly complaining they couldn't get enough of them. NVIDIA's revenue went from $27 billion in 2022 to over $60 billion in 2023, and it just kept climbing. Jensen Huang, the guy who once had to lay people off, became one of the wealthiest people on the planet. So, what can we learn from NVIDIA? It's not just that NVIDIA got lucky with AI. Plenty of companies were around when deep learning took off. They didn't all become NVIDIA. The real story here is conviction. Jensen Huang made a bet in 2006 with CUDA that most people thought was weird. He spent over a decade building an ecosystem around it before it paid off. He saw GPUs not as gaming hardware, but as a new kind of computing architecture, and he was right about a world that hadn't arrived yet. He is a visionary.